Hello, SAINTCON. How's everybody doing today? Woo! Thank you. So excited to be here. Thank you all so much for coming to my presentation today. I know there were some LAN parties up late last night, so glad everybody can make it so early, 10:30 in the morning. But let's get right into it. My presentation's called Unlocking Physical Security, 3D Printing Your Way Inside. And what we're going to go through is kind of talk about the mix between hackers and 3D printing. We're going to talk about a bunch of physical pen testing tools, a couple of defensive tools, and all that you can 3D print. Then we'll go over some 3D printing tips and kind of where you can download them. So let's get right into it. I'm Noah Pack. I'm a product pen tester at a Fortune 500 company. I mainly do aerospace stuff now, but I'm also a contractor for WebCheck security. And I own JPID Engineering. So at JPID Engineering, we do some 3D printing consulting and like small batch 3D printing for other companies that then wholesale those. So how many people in this room have ever used a 3D printer? Let's get a show of hands. Oh my gosh, that's almost everybody. And who owns a 3D printer? Okay, that's like pretty much the same amount of people. That's awesome. And that's totally what I expected, because 3D printing and hacking kind of have this huge overlap. It's all about kind of taking something that does one thing and making it do something that you want, right? So with 3D printing, you can create anything that you can imagine. And with hacking, you can take something that's built to do one thing and completely manipulate it, make it give you shell access, make it just make an exploit, all sorts of stuff. And that's really cool to me that so many people are into both hobbies. But when it comes to 3D printing, kind of my mission with this talk and in general is that I really don't like 3D printed junk. So a lot of people who own 3D printers have only ever printed little flexi dragons and keychains, and those things are cool. It's a great way to test your 3D printer, get the settings calibrated. But if all you do with your 3D printer is create things that end up in a landfill, then your 3D printer is a tool that creates garbage. But what's so powerful about a 3D printer is it's a tool that can create other tools. So that's what I want to recommend that you do with that today, is use your 3D printers to fix things, to create tools, to reduce waste, save things from the landfill. And here's some examples. So replacement parts. That's a Russian night vision scope on the bottom left. And it was totally functional, but without a battery cover, it couldn't be used. So we 3D printed a battery cover and it worked great. And that was found at a thrift store for like $5. So you can save yourself a ton of money just by 3D printing things. And then on the top and on the right, those are some things that I sell through JPID Engineering. But there's a lot of stuff you can 3D print that's useful. Little shelves, Christmas ornaments, gifts. That's for measuring like suspension on off-road vehicles. But let's take this into pen testing, right? That's what you're all here for. So the key thing I want you to remember from this slide is that second point. Don't leave things less secure than when you found them, okay? You don't want to break a window or break a lock and prevent it from ever latching again. Oh my gosh, you're so right. I was editing this late last night, okay? But do not do that, yeah. But let's get into the tools. So remember that. Don't leave things less secure. Sorry about that. But this first tool is bump key rebound rings. So who here's used a bump key? Okay, sweet. Probably like a third of you. So a bump key has these uniform grooves that you can see in that bottom picture. And when you put it into a lock and you hit the back of it, it sets the pins inside the lock at the right level that the lock can then be turned and the door can be opened. But putting a rebound ring, this little rubber piece, in between the key and the keyway of the lock just resets the key after every bump, so you can just keep going at it. It also prevents you from damaging the lock. You can 3D print these out of TPU, which is kind of like a rubbery material. It's a little bit more expensive than the typical plastics, but the plastics wouldn't work for this because it needs to be rubber. And in the top right there, those are commonly used as bump key rebound rings. You can get those at a farm store. They're actually for doing things to animals that the animals might not like. That's right. Yeah, somebody knows it. But we got another bump key related tool, and that's the bump key lever. So if you're anything like me and you've been using a bump key, you might hit your thumb and your pointer finger like 10 times as much as you actually hit the key. And so that's why I invented this. And it just goes right on top of the bump key. It's got a little notch to keep it in place. And it also improves kind of the turning feel. So you're not overturning it or underturning it, but just makes using a bump key a little bit easier. And this design, along with a lot of the other ones I'm going to go over today, I have. So if you don't own a 3D printer, I've got a bag full of these that I can give out afterwards in that hallway out there. Next up is keys. So who knew you could 3D print keys? I didn't until pretty recently. But there's this awesome website I'm not affiliated with called keygen.co. You can put in the keyway, the bitting, and the bitting is just the depth of the different cuts on the key. And then you can 3D print an exact one. So on the top, we've got a key for a master lock. And what's awesome about these master lock keys is even if you can't measure the bitting yourself, they print it right there on it for you. And then you can just type that into the website and 3D print your key. And unfortunately, a lot of keys are like that. That other key in the picture has the bitting printed on it. Type that up, 3D print it. You definitely want to use strong material so that this doesn't break inside your lock. And to get the bitting, you can use a tool like that. I think that one's from Red Team Tools. There's also apps that can take a picture of a key and give you the bitting. And then you put it right into this website, 3D print an exact copy of their key. You probably couldn't 3D print a bump key just because you're hitting the back of it with a hammer, and it's likely that the teeth are going to break off inside the lock as they're hitting the pins so many times. And then if you've ever seen a spy movie where somebody's taken a key just for 1 second from a security guard and they press it into a bar of soap or a piece of clay and then they make their own key, that's totally real. You can do that. And this is an awesome activity just for fun for your team at work, or maybe you're like a scout leader. But yeah, I know a lot of people in this room are probably scout leaders and stuff. Yeah, research purposes. There you go. But I made 2 different designs for casting keys, and you just want to fill that with some Sculpey 3 clay and some alloy ingots. You can get those from craft stores. But this is a super fun activity, and tons of real red teamers that I know are using 3D printed molds instead of the metal ones out in the field on their pen tests. Next up, we got anti-latching blocks. So maybe at some point you've seen a lock that was taped over, preventing it from latching. This does the same thing, but it's a lot less visible. So with the Watergate scandal, actually, the security guard that caught those spies that were trying to steal information on Richard Nixon's political opponents, they were caught because the security guard was walking through the facility and he saw a lock that was taped with duct tape, and the tape was sticking out. And he walked up and he pulled the tape off and kept going on his rounds. He didn't think much of it because you see that all the time. But on his second round, a little bit later, the tape was replaced. There's new tape there. And that's how they ended up getting caught. So if you can keep the latch from completely closing without it being visible to anyone, then there you go. That's a great tool. And I would recommend doing this in TPU as well because it's a little bit softer, makes it easier to put in and to take it out. You don't want to leave your customer less secure than when you started. So definitely don't want to leave these behind. And you can pull them out with a traveler's hook. They've got a little cutout for that. Next up, we got door wedges. That thing in the top right corner in that obnoxious green color, that's called a wedget. And it's commonly used by first responders. You can buy them on Amazon for like 10 to 15 bucks, I think. And it props a door open 3 different ways. It can like sit on the top. It can work like in that picture on the bottom right, or you can also just use it like a typical doorstop. But this 3D print version does almost the same things except for going on top of the door. And you'd probably want to use a strong material for this, especially if you're dealing with heavy metal commercial doors that swing closed. So you can just set that right on the thing that goes like that. I'm forgetting what it's called, but yeah. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, skimmers. So we've all seen videos of people at the gas station and they are shaking the thing that they just put their credit card into and they find that it's coming off and it looks exactly the same as what's underneath it. And unfortunately, that's super common, but we can take a page from that book. We can skim RFID from commercial access readers. So there's tons of tiny RFID readers like that one pictured, or there's one, I think it's called like a chameleon that's super small. You can scan a reader with your phone. If you've got an iPhone, there's some pretty good apps called Polycam and EM3D. And you just scan the reader, put it in your 3D modeling software and scale the size up, and then make a cutout for your RFID skimmer and make sure you do low infill. That way the RFID signals will still go through the plastic into the actual reader that's below it. But not releasing my design for this because I actually work for the company I made the skimmer for. So sorry about that, but legal, yeah. But next up, we got the tailgater. This one's got magnets built into it. You can just buy those magnets on Amazon for like a couple bucks. And then as you're printing, pause the print, put the magnets inside, and then keep printing. And then stick this on top of a metal door frame. When the door is opened, it'll fall in between the door and the frame, and then it'll keep that door propped open. And when is a door not a door? When it's a jar. Thank you. Flip phone, no practical use for this. I just designed it and I love it. Instead of looking like you're playing with your Flipper Zero, look like you're, a time traveler. But yeah, it's got cutouts for all the I/O on your Flipper Zero. So fun little case for that. Sneak them into Australia where they're banned. No, don't do that. That's illegal. But you could, but don't. But yes, research purposes. I like that. All right. Now we'll get kind of into the defensive tools. So, rec sensors, requests to exit. You'll see them on pretty much every commercial door inside of a facility. It's fire code. It's a law to protect people so that everybody can always leave the building, but the doors remain locked from the outside. And so when you walk in front of it, it detects you and it opens the door. But to bypass this, you can just stick some compressed air in there and shoot it. I've seen people blow vape in between the gap on a door and it opened the rec sensor and then they could walk through. You could also just take like a piece of paper, but this design limits the field of view of that sensor. So fire marshals might not like this. I don't know if it's allowed, but I've used it and it does work to make things a little bit harder for a red teamer to get in through that door from the other side by using the rec sensor. All right. And then if you've ever seen an under the door tool, I'm sure we got some of them downstairs. You swing that underneath the door and then it goes over the door handle and you can pull on it and it opens the door from the other side. Hotels use this all the time to open doors. Pen testers use this. It's pretty common. My dad works physical security for a university, and he's even had students using these to break into labs. But with this, you can screw it onto the door, and it kind of negates that gap between the door handle and the door, which is where the under the door tool slides on. So this makes it a little bit harder, although not impossible, to open the door with an under the door tool, and it costs pennies. So why not, right? Next up, we got the J tool, another one you can definitely find downstairs. And the J tool's got this little turner on it. So when you turn that black side of the handle, it makes the tip spin. and that's for turning a lock latch on the other side of the door. So you can stick that in the gap between two doors, put it onto the lock, and then turn it, and theoretically it'll open the door for you or unlock the door for you. But with something like this, you can screw it onto the door and completely cover up that gap. So that's a good way to prevent that. You can also buy these commercially. Tons of different companies make them, but it's plastic. It's cheap to make, but companies want to charge you $50, $100 for these. Why not 3D print them and save yourself the money? Offset the cost that you spent on your 3D printer. And then I've seen a lot of people walking around with their keys hanging off a belt loop today and yesterday. And earlier I talked about an app. You can just go up and take a picture of keys and it'll give you the bidding. Then you can 3D print that exact key. Well, covering up your keys will prevent that. It'll make you a harder target. It will protect your keys from prying eyes. So 3D print one of these. There's tons of them online. Costs about $1 to 3D print. And you can throw all your keys, your AirTag and stuff in there. And then it's just a little bit more secure than if it's hanging off your belt. Next, we got the hotel room lock stopper. So pretty much every hotel room I've been in has got these locks in the top right where there's that latch that flips over. And then when the door's unlocked and you open the door, it only opens like yay much, right? Well, that I wouldn't call it a lock. It doesn't protect you. It doesn't keep you safe. It's really just a security theater maybe, but hotels have this tool. First responders have it up in the top. That's called a lock jockey. And so if you've got one of those latches on your apartment, your hotel, you just shove that through the gap and it opens up that latch and the latch swings over. So then if they can open up the other lock, then the door's open. And if you're staying at a hotel, they've got a master key that'll open up every hotel room. With this, it actually provides you some security in your hotel room, in your dorm room, wherever. You slide it over the door handle, and then it presses on top of the thumb turn for that lock. So even if the hotel uses their master key and tries to open the hotel room, that latch has to move. And so with this, it won't, if you get the tolerances right. And the design that I've published for this, it only fits one type of lock. So if you've got a different one that you've encountered and you want a design for that made, take some measurements for me. Even just a picture with your phone might be enough if there's like something of reference inside the picture. And then we can 3D print the right size piece to go over that door handle and that latch. And I'll publish the design for everybody to use on printables. There's tons of other 3D printable projects. I've seen a lot walking around the conference. One person had a 3D printed llama with a computer inside of it. That's awesome. I've also made a bunch of Raspberry Pi cases. Those ones for the SANS Research Center. And certifications, Ponagachi cases. I've got one of those on my bag. Just 3D print stuff that is cool and that you'll use multiple times. Use it to aid your other projects to learn skills like radios and like Wi-Fi hacking. So do stuff like that. That's really cool. When it comes to 3D printers, I really only recommend Prusa and Bamboo. I'm sure most people in this room that own a 3D printer have a Ender 3. Is that right? Yeah. I hear some laughs. Probably people that their Ender 3 doesn't work right now. And I don't blame you. They're super hard to use and calibrate. But with Bamboo printers, they've got a ton of sensors. So they'll calibrate themselves. They'll run a bunch of tests that take about 15 minutes before every print. And then your prints always come out fantastic. I've run my Bamboo printers probably 5,000 hours, just like combined between the two. But I haven't had any significant issues. I replaced a hot end on one once, but then after doing so, I realized I really didn't even have to do that. I could have just flushed it. But Bamboo printers are awesome. They're so reliable and they're so useful. They can use a ton of different filaments, and the slicer's got pre-made settings for all of those. When it comes to CAD, if you've never done any 3D modeling before, Tinkercad's awesome. I know a lot of schools use that. It's pretty basic. Anything complicated that you make will be a huge mess of polygons, but it'll still work. So if you want something free in the browser that you can do on like a Chromebook, Tinkercad's great. Fusion 360, a little bit more professional. I've used that a bunch. 3D Builder, that's made by Microsoft, and you can import any image and turn it into a 3D model. So that's super useful. On this slide, we've got those certifications. To make those, all I did was upload the JPEG to Microsoft 3D Builder, and it made that model for me. So that's an awesome tool. You can even do some adjustment of your 3D prints inside the slicing software. So that's the software for the printer that like gets the file ready to be printed. And that's like a 3D scan of someone that I cleaned up in the Bamboo Slicer. When it comes to tools, your phone is an awesome tool. iPhones have a great LiDAR sensor that can be used for 3D tracking, and you can make 3D models like that one in the bottom right. A deburring tool and calipers are also really useful. Probably some tiny pliers are useful too for like removing supports if your models have them. And then when it comes to 3D printing tips, drying your filament is number one above all. So even if your filament arrives inside a sealed plastic bag with a little desiccant packet inside of it, it could still be wet. And I just got a huge shipment of filament that was all wet inside of the plastic bags. So drying out your filament will make a huge difference on your prints. I know we live in Utah. It's pretty dry here, but still drying your filament can make a big difference. And if you get a Bamboo printer, it'll even tell you like the moisture level of your filament inside the top there. Print orientation is a big one. On the bottom there, that's a key broken off in a lock. And that's from Reddit. It was posted on r/3D printing, and then shortly thereafter reposted on r/locksmithing, where the people were really digging into this guy because he's asking like, oh, do I call a locksmith to do this? I don't know. I 3D printed my key. But what he did wrong was he printed it the tall way. So the key was standing up on one end when he really should have printed it horizontally. So that way the layer lines, the strongest point of the print, are going up and down instead of side to side. And so that makes a huge difference in your prints, what orientation they're at, especially if they're so small. When it comes to something bigger like those blocks that keep a door open, those ones, it doesn't really matter too much. But that's all the models I had for you guys. I've got a huge bag of everything. If you want one, and I'll be out in that hallway handing them out. If you want to email me and ask any questions, request a design is made, I'm happy to make pen testing stuff for free and post it on printables. So email me, engineering@jpid.com. My printables account is NoPack, and the collection is listed there. There's actually an underscore. Just make sure you add that if you're typing in the URL and not clicking the link in these slides. But thank you so much to everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. If you got any questions or you want one of these models, I'll be standing right out there. And thank you.